Arnout, is there anything that we should have said about you that we didn't? Any backstory we need to fill in? Any secrets you want to share before we go any deeper?
No. I think most of it has been said, and I'm just looking forward to it. Cool.
Nice. Okay, that's cool. In which case, business as usual, feel free to interrupt me or stop me at any point if I'm boring or if you've got an opinion that's more interesting than mine, and we will blitz through some of what's been happening in the ecosystem over the last few weeks. As ever, yes, there will be a recording available afterwards at yoast.com/webinar. I think we're going to talk about all the kind of usual topics that we usually do. And as always, I'm sorry, there is a lot of AI because AI is the only thing that exists at the moment. There is some other stuff happening, and we'll try and focus on that and balance the scales a little bit. We always say that, we never do manage. And then, yeah, we're going to reserve a bit of time to talk to Arnout about what is a site migration, what goes wrong, what should and shouldn't you do, what can you learn, how do you minimize risk, that sort of stuff. And then, as ever, we will finish with some Q&A. So start asking your questions in the questions thing, and we will collect them for later. So, oh, yes, also, before we jump in, if we lose you, if you want to learn more about what we've talked about, if you want to dive in deeper, there is a list of all the links for all the content and all the articles that we're going to be talking about that you can dive into, or you can go and learn more about SEO, understand some of the acronyms we're using, sign up and become an expert in some of these areas yourself at Yoast SEO Academy. Okay, what is happening in Google, the thing that drives us all and keeps us all busy and up at night? Well, some interesting stuff, I think. We don't often talk about some of the kind of smaller tests that Google are doing, but this one I thought was interesting. There's examples of them showing multiple featured snippets for some types of queries. And I think this is particularly interesting because Google's model has kind of always been, for one search, there's one perfect answer. And maybe this is them beginning to acknowledge that some types of queries, maybe different opinions and diverse perspectives matter, and that's important. I think this is, maybe this is just a test, but maybe this is them starting to open out that ecosystem a bit. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm thinking the same. I think it's a test, and I think user behavior might conclude things, but I think it's also, it might be a preemptive strike towards ChatGPT, where there's basically saying it's one answer, generative AI. So I think it also has to do with that. Like, how can we craft an experience that will show two sides of the story?
Yeah, and this is something I think we've touched on the last 2 or 3 webinars we've done. This idea that maybe some kind of diverse perspectives in the search result is a more useful experience in some types of searches than just either a conventional list of results or just a single result. The tactical thing I wanted to highlight on this is I think this makes it more important than ever that your content is well structured. Like, you've got a nice overview, things are broken into clear sections, you've got headings that describe the thing you're going to talk about, you've got well-structured paragraphs. Because if Google is going to be tactically extracting these bits and comparing them with other sites' similar answers, then having that really well-structured content is going to be important. I did also wonder, there's some interesting stuff that came out the EEAT guidelines about you having to be consistent with other sites. Like, if every other site on the internet says the sky is blue and you say the sky is red, then you don't rank. But maybe there is an opportunity here to have a slightly different opinion or a slightly more nuanced opinion, or to focus on a specific niche within an answer and then maybe stand out, but you don't want to take it too far away from consensus. I thought that's quite a tricky thing to balance.
Yeah, but I think that needs to happen, right? Because otherwise we will always be seeing outdated things. For instance, there's one way to operate in a knee surgery. If there's now a new way of doing it, it means you can't talk about that because the rest of the world,
the facts have been established,
which wouldn't make sense. So I think this is a thin line. But if it's obvious that it's wrong, then don't go there.
Agreed, but that's really interesting, the idea that you could maybe compete on newness and being super up to date with your content. I know we've talked previously about you should definitely go back occasionally and look at the stuff you wrote in 2013 and see if it's still relevant. And maybe there are opportunities to update slightly out of date things and bring it back into life so it can compete. Yeah, that's interesting. One thing I wanted to call out is this is not the same thing as perspectives, which is a word I've used a few times there when I probably shouldn't have. This is a different feature that's rolling out currently in the US on mobile. This, I think, is fascinating. So there's been a whole bunch of people who have been complaining very loudly and essentially saying the only way you can get good, authentic human results in Google is by going to Reddit instead of Google. And Google is so over-optimized by the SEO industry in some sectors that you can't find an answer that isn't like a corporate shill with a lead generation form. And the way they're starting to combat that is this idea that they can cherry pick out human opinion and forum results and Instagram posts and TikTok shorts, etc., and types of content that they've found that are from real opinionated humans. I think this has been something that's been missing from Google since day one, and it's super interesting now to see them doubling down on that. And again, yeah, this feels like a reaction to a world of auto-generated AI content, right? This is human, it's authentic, it's real, I can trust it.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah, I wonder if this will, this is still a test in the US, but I think this might become more prominent in certain types of search results. Things like, I want a good restaurant near me. I don't want the restaurant with the best SEO, I want the best restaurant. And there should be some kind of correlation with that if they're a good brand doing good business, but maybe not always the case. So yeah, that was cool. We've touched on Google search generative experience stuff a couple of times. This is evolving. This is still a test, but I think we're now at the point where it looks like Google are convinced that this is certainly not the future of search, but a future. There's certain types of queries where you get these automatically generated results types. They're going really big on the kind of obvious places you might think, like travel, where the travel sector is quite codified. There are hotels that have rooms and prices and dates and destinations and flights. All of these things are quite easy to model. So they're starting there. But if they've got that far, probably not far to restaurants. It's probably not far to dentists. This becomes increasingly the types of formats they give us for these longer term queries. The question I still have is who searches like this? You look at the search query in that box, it's like 20 words long. We've spent a decade training ourselves to type short things. I think this is really alien still. I'm not convinced normal users will do this.
But there's two things on this, right? Because we've seen a big shift going from 1 word to 2 word, 3 words, multiple word search terms, basically, or people searching for that. And I think this could potentially, for a group of people, be where voice search comes in, right? Because it's very easy to just speak out loud and go, this is exactly what I'm looking for, blah, 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 blah. And then, boom, you get the result. I think for those kind of things, it could literally be massive. And if you just look at the younger generations, they do a lot more with voice notes, voice search on YouTube, TVs. So I think that could be something.
Yeah, I was going to mention TVs. I've had so many emails over the last few weeks of Google pushing their next generation home smart displays. And I have a Samsung TV with a Google Nest thing attached to it. Like increasingly these interfaces are all unifying. And yeah, I talk to my TV, I give that voice queries, not kind of Google searches, but it's not a huge behavioral shift to do this sort of thing on the TV. And this is a great format for that.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And I
we're
think
just too old.
And at the same time, what I'm seeing is what Google does with this is because you're logged in, it just is being added to your profile, right?
Yes.
So this is where targeting comes in. This is where, so it might not be monetizable directly in the SERP, but it will be later down the line, because now they know you've expressed an interest to go here. You might have even told Google when you're looking to go. And think about the possibilities of monetizing that.
Yeah, especially when you consider how much work they put into, was it last year they put into journeys, which was them going, okay,
exactly.
If I'm going to buy a car, I don't go buy a car. I search 20 times on 4 devices over 6 weeks. And actually them understanding that this is one cohesive process. And yeah, they don't need to monetize this with an advert because they know that 3 weeks from now, there'll be something they can show different AdWords. But yeah, that's super interesting.
And they can basically start like, what are you willing to bid for somebody we know at 80% sure they're going to book something with
in market for, Yep. And then you look at Google Ads taking away audience targeting and it all being automatic. It's because it's all powered like this. Yeah,
exactly.
That's very sensible.
Exactly.
Right, what else have we got? My thing stopped working. There we go. This is fairly small, but it was quite nice. I think we've complained previously on the show that Google, well, we've definitely complained a lot that Google Search Console's reporting is at best opaque often, and more often just not very useful. One of the really annoying bits was they launched a bunch of video reporting a couple of months ago now, and it was super generic, super vague, super high level. You could only really get a chart that said how many impressions have you had and no way to filter it. It was more harm than good. It confused a lot of people. It didn't provide much insight. They've started to evolve that now. So one of the reports that was really annoying was if you've got any videos on your site, it would say video pages, videos aren't indexed, and it would just say, oh, we can't find the main video on the page, or we're not sure what's going on. They've broken that out a little bit to give a bit more insight into why they might choose not to index your videos. If you're doing stuff with videos, this might now be useful, help you understand why they might say this is too far down the page, or it's too small, and you can start to optimize against that. So actually some tactical useful stuff, which is nice.
Finally.
And this, I guess, is the big news. That's the same big news that's always the big news, is that there's a continual push alongside all of this to break up Google's ad business. And exactly the stuff we were just saying about search generative experience, helping understand that somebody's in an in-market buying process, and then 3 weeks later, you might change how the AdWords ecosystem treats them. There is a push from pretty much all the major states in Europe and elsewhere to make that legal and to break up the parts of Google that talk to each other to allow them to do that. This is an ongoing narrative that's been happening for a decade now, and nobody really knows where it goes. Nobody really knows what breakup means or what happens if they are broken up or any of that. But I think it's interesting that all of this might change overnight. We don't know what happens next.
Yeah, but I think it was more so about the fact that they all own all the ad tech, right? They own the inventory, all the exchanges and all of that, the majority of it. So it basically means that even if you use another advertiser, you're still paying Google, right? I've been pushing very hard. I've been in interviews with the European Union on this, and I said this is what needs to happen, right? We need to double down on them. I mean, that was just a casual chat, just how do you call it? Talking to people. On the state of it, I feel like Google is way too dominant.
Yeah, and for exactly the kind of search generative experience things we were talking about, I've had a similar example for years that if Google Maps is great, and all the cars drive around and they take photos of all the businesses, and if as part of that they also happen to notice density of footfall and which businesses are open at which hours and close and when they're quiet, and they can use that information to pipe back into the Google Ads ecosystem to optimize for when you should bid, then maybe that's great for users. Maybe it's dystopian, maybe it's abuse. Maybe it's fine, but we should decide that collectively legally rather than just kind of letting it happen. So yeah, pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And then another story that's old by now is if you haven't already migrated from Universal Analytics to Google Analytics 4 or something that isn't garbage like Google Analytics 4, say a Piwik or a Fathom or a Matomo, or there's a fourth one I forget. The story was previously that GA would stop working, but now they've kind of doubled down and said, oh, actually, it will migrate quite gracefully all by itself. But this is definitely a watershed moment to say, if you're not actively thinking about how and why you're measuring stuff on your website and you've just always had analytics and you never really configured it, now is a really good time to say, what does success look like? How do I understand engagement? What do I need to know about how people are using and interacting with my content, and what decisions does that help me to make, and how does that affect my business? Start asking those questions and then look to the tech, because GA4 is very different to UA. Other kit has different pros and cons and strengths and weaknesses. Now is the time to review. I bet you've been pretty busy migrating various people, right, Arnout?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not fun, right?
Well, it is fun because it leads to conversations like, what do you really want to track? What does success look to you, right? What is success? It creates fun conversations because a lot of businesses don't really have a clue. They go, well, I need to measure my bounce rate. And I'm like, why?
Yeah, what does that even mean? Why? For what? What actions will you take off the back of this if it decreases by 2%? Is 2% okay? Who gets fired if it decreases 10%? When do you break the champagne out? Like, yeah, those are conversations that you should have. We had a really good webinar with Jill Quick, I think 6 or 7 months ago, maybe even now, talking about kind of the migration path from UA to GA4. Yeah, Laura's just asked in the chat, GA4 accounts are being, if you're on Universal Analytics, they will kind of automatically upgrade you and they will migrate some of what you have in Universal Analytics, but I wouldn't rely on it being like for like. The reports will be different, some of the data and numbers work differently, and you really should take it as an opportunity to say, how does all of this behave? Okay, right, onwards. Time for some Bing news. This is my favorite part of the webinar because I always say Bing is my second favorite search engine, and then I have to stop and challenge myself because I'm not really sure if that's true, but I'll put it over to you. What is your second favorite search engine and why is it Bing?
No, I like Bing a lot, and for a long period of time I've had the Bing Wednesdays, so every Wednesday was Bing, and
oh, wow.
And it was actually it gives you a lot of insights, and I truly think that any SEO or any webmaster or website owner should at least have Bing Webmaster Tools because it gives you so much interesting information, way more than Google Search Console, in my opinion.
Yeah,
and they've made it so easy. So maybe the Bing Wednesdays are my little thing where I really want them to succeed, aka to become a lot bigger. And I basically, the last stat I saw was that they went from 4 to 6 or maybe 8% even. So they've gone up quite significantly.
That's interesting, and I suspect I know why, and we'll come on to that. Here we are, in fact. So I think the thing that grew their market share, certainly in the immediate short term, was they launched a whole bunch of AI stuff before Google. We've talked about that. But actually, Bing Chat has evolved quite quickly into quite a useful tool. I know a whole bunch of SEOs who rely on this as kind of their day-to-day work for research, for validation, for interrogating stuff. Bing Chat got to citations and crawling external sources a lot sooner than Google and ChatGPT. So it's super interesting and useful. And now, however, the drawback is obviously you've only been able to use it in the kind of Microsoft Edge ecosystem. Now they've announced that you're going to be able to use it in Chrome and other browsers, and they're going to set it free a bit. That might be super interesting, but I think it will kill their market share, right? If the reason people are jumping on Bing is to use this new tech, and suddenly it's everywhere, they shoot themselves in the foot on that, or is it a branding play? It's an interesting move.
I'm just impressed by how Microsoft does all of this. And I think as a challenger, it's a lot easier because you're not being scrutinized as the source. So if Google screws stuff up, it's all over. If Bing does that, it's like, oh, we'll change it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things we talk about on this periodically. I think it's one of the advantages you have as the underdog or as the small business is you can move fast, you can experiment, you can break things, you can be agile. You're not buried in all the bureaucracy and processes and legacy. You can just do, you can ship in a way that, the big players can't. And that's how you compete. I think, it's always struck me as odd that Bing seemed to have been resigned to just chase Google and be a not very good version of Google when they do have the opportunity to do something different and something else. So, we'll see where that goes. Okay, here we go. Some more AI news. We've tried to condense it a bit. This I thought was pretty exciting. So OpenAI, which powers ChatGPT, has released a whole bunch of fancy updates to its API, its backend systems, its pricing, its capabilities, all of which essentially consolidate down to this is now a super easy, super powerful way to generate content, not just content, but answers, but ideas, stuff. And you can start to see just how powerful this becomes in the example I've shared. So I took the article from Search Engine Journal, of the URL of it, announcing these updates, and asked ChatGPT to summarize it in my tone of voice based on an article that I've written. And this took 3 seconds, and it spits out a very nice summary in bullet points that read exactly the kind of the way that I would say and write.
You've cloned yourself, Jono. You've cloned yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. This is like, I don't have to do any work now. I just ask the machines, right? If I can ask Google to ask ChatGPT via my TV, I don't have to get off the sofa. Be ideal. But like this is scratching the surface, and this is the kind of thing I think if you haven't played with this yet and you're a little bit hesitant, this is the tip of the iceberg on the kinds of firepower that's available, and it really is worth going and experimenting with streamlining workflows. I still don't buy into the idea of like generating long form content and automating all of your SEO, but I really do buy into the idea of shortcutting workflows and streamlining anywhere where I need to hit the keyboard a lot as part of a process isn't a great process. This streamlines things a lot. So, yeah, really super powerful.
I think another part is just rewriting stuff, right? Or ask for two opposing views, which helps you basically generate your ideas or get inspired what another view might be on something.
Or tell me what Einstein would think about this, or the kind of getting different perspectives and challenging that is a really good way to iterate on content like this. Yeah, this is super powerful. Really, really nice. And then the other side of the field, we have Mark Zuckerberg saying that any minute now there will be AI throughout all of the Meta products, which we've seen coming for a while. We've already seen an AI chatbot on Instagram. We've already seen evidence of photo stuff. I wonder if this is too little too late from Facebook and from Meta trying to catch up with everything else. Everyone now has to have an AI thing to be comparable. But I think if you're doing text stuff, you're doing it with ChatGPT. If you're doing image stuff, maybe you're doing it in Instagram, but you're probably more likely in a Photoshop or something. It's a strange flex. For advertisers, it definitely makes sense. The idea that you can spin up a whole bunch of ads with some generative content, but then how much are we going to trust the images that we see in adverts? Are we just going to become blind to that? It's a little bit weird.
But I think if you have a few videos or a few pieces of content, and then generative AI can make it into one, that for me would make sense, right? So it's basically creating, say, 10 different versions and then A/B test. So again, it's about shortcutting it. So I think for advertisers, but also for creating a reel, like it takes out everything. You just tell it like, I want this kind of music, blah, 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 and it will all do it. 4 versions.
Yeah, or 4,000 versions.
Whatever. So for that, yes.
And then the same story as Google is all of this might be problematic, we know it's problematic in many ways. We know that there are still huge questions around citations and around fair usage and copyright, etc. We are seeing the first steps of conversation start to address that. I was a little underwhelmed by this. So the EU are launching the AI Act, which sounds like a great first step, but really all it covers meaningfully is you are no longer allowed to scrape faces from public sources and use those in training sets, which is such a small part of the bigger problem that, yes, it's important for privacy, and yes, we shouldn't be using CCTV footage to build fake people, but it kind of misses the bigger point and the bigger question around ownership of data. So we shall see. But yeah, it's nice to see some progress in the law moving at not a glacial pace around this sort of thing. Okay, some very exciting WordPress news. Just the one, I think, which is that we just got back from WordCamp Europe in Athens, which was super lovely and far too hot. I am not an Athens person. No, it's lovely, really nice. There were 3,500, I think, people there. That might be the wrong number. You can count all of them in that big photo if you want. WordPress geeks and nerds of every flavor. We ran a Pride party, which was pretty awesome. We had a booth there alongside sibling brands from Yearth and Bluehost. There were a bunch of talks and workshops. This is super exciting because it's a kind of sneak peek into, Taka says 2,500. There's only 1,000 out. It's a bit of a sneak peek into where WordPress is everyone who's kind of a contributor to core and the software ends up there. So you get some really interesting discussions around what do we think we should be working on, prioritizing. Some really cool stuff around performance and the next generation of the block editor. So yeah, we're doing a whole bunch of stuff behind the scenes, following up on that, trying to shape where WordPress goes. Super cool. No immediate takeaways, but worth noting, if you do want to get behind the scenes, there's all sorts of WordCamp events all around the world, all year round. Google WordCamp, find one near you. I think there's even some links in the WordPress dashboard based on where you are to the nearest events. Go check it out. Yeah, we have a contributor day as well. Thanks, Taco. If you want to get involved in tinkering with WordPress itself and giving something back, that's super nice. But it's also a way to kind of get behind the scenes and get a sneak peek into what's coming, which obviously can be a nice advantage. So that was good. Okay, social media news. Twitter is still on fire. I don't think that's a surprise, but yeah, ad revenue is tanking. do we jump ship or do we hold on in the hopes that some of this sorts itself out? What do we do?
I did notice that when I publish something now, it gets more traction, but most of my feed is pretty irrelevant to me, which, so to be honest, I've been posting more and more on Mastodon.
Oh, wow. Okay. I created a Mastodon account, but I've never ever used it. So, sad times. I'm behind the times. Interesting. Dee says in the chat, what was the link for the WordPress contribution? Taco, could you help out? That'd be lovely. We should definitely encourage people to get involved. So yeah, Twitter, we talked about this before. It's still a place where new content gets discovered. It's still a place where journalists and SEOs find and share stuff which can be useful and powerful. Yeah, we'll see what happens. Meanwhile, the part of the answer might be Meta's competitor. We've touched on this a few times, but now we have some leaked screenshots repeatedly, potential name Threads. I find it odd that this is a separate app alongside Instagram. Now I need to post my photos over here and post my thoughts over there. That feels not like a kind of intuitive thing. Maybe I'm not the target audience, but that feels like a lot of work to be like compartmentalizing how I want to share bits of my experience with the world. We shall see, right? At least it's decentralized, which is quite nice. It's not a grand evil server collecting everyone's data everywhere. But yeah, I'm not sure. We'll wait and see. Are you rushing to get on Threads?
Not yet.
No, we shall see. Okay, lastly, some other tech news, bits and pieces. If you have been living under a rock, you will have missed that Apple announced Vision Pro, which is their super fancy next generation augmented reality headset, which comes in at a eye-watering, ironically, about $3,500. It is smart tech. It is really quite impressive, but I'm not convinced there's a market there for it yet. The SEO and tech industries, and even the gaming industries and hardcore kind of IT industries are mixed. I think the people I've talked to who've used it say it is very, very impressive, but it's continuing to solve a problem that doesn't really exist yet, which is actually my keyboard and mouse and monitor, quite a good interface for working, and having to wear a clunky headset that has to be plugged in because it only has a 2-hour battery life to get more virtual screens here. It's a bit weird. It's early days yet. I think this is an interesting experiment. I think there is an audience for it, but it's probably not me. It's probably not the average business user or owner. But it's interesting to see the space moving forward. I think that we're not many years off from this being a bit more normal, but this certainly isn't the one. Are you going to buy one? You're going to buy 2? You're going to buy 10?
No.
Everyone's Christmas list, the must-have gift this year. Yeah, no, the battery life was a killer. Like 2 hours is not enough to do any meaningful work. No. Taco says he'd love to have one for work. Oh, yeah, but Taco's office, if you haven't seen it in the videos, has like a monitor that is larger than my house. It's like 60 foot wide and curved. It's incredible. I don't know how he gets any work done. I had to sit at his desk once and I tried to I'm going to send an email, and it was like going to an IMAX cinema. It was impossible to focus. It's horrible. Give me a little screen here. I'm happy. And then last other news, it is Cloudflare Speed Week. We talk about Cloudflare a lot on here. We are not affiliated, but it is great kit. If you don't know what Cloudflare is or you're not using it, it's a content delivery network. It is a performance optimization thing. It sits in front of your website. You can get a free account. It is magic. If you haven't done any performance optimization stuff, this will do a whole bunch of it for you. They have paid and premium accounts, which you can look into, but most people will be fine with a free one. Every year they do Speed Week, and they launch a whole bunch of features based on just making your website faster. That is now. They've launched a bunch of stuff today and yesterday. If you want to outspeed your competitors, this is probably the easiest way to do it. The new stuff today was this dashboard of monitoring stuff, which is probably the best performance monitoring dashboard stuff I've seen. It breaks it down geographically. You can go and get real-time suggestions. Really super cool. Cloudflare is my favorite piece of kit other than Yoast SEO. Yeah, definitely worth the play.
I second that.
Nice. It is just phenomenally good. Definitely worth going and playing. And if you're going to be super nerdy and diving deeper, yeah, check the link Taco shared and go and turn on all the toggles. Most of the stuff they do is just like click the button, turn it on, go get a cup of tea. It's great. Okay, lastly, I promise before we get to the good stuff, some Yoast news. If you are using our Wincher integration, Wincher is a rank tracking platform, so you can monitor how your keywords are doing over time. We have an integration, make sure you've turned it on. We have upgraded that. We've added a bunch of new toys and new tools and a dashboard widget, so you can see exactly how your keywords are doing when you log into your WordPress site in situ, which is super nice, and a bunch of other bits and pieces as well. And then lastly, sadly, we're taking a little bit of a summer break. So we usually do one of these every month. But as of after this one, we're going to take a break during July and August so that everybody can get a suntan. I'm not allowed to go outside, so I won't be. But we'll be back later down the line with something just as fun and interesting. If you are subscribed to our newsletter, which you can do with the green button below, you will get an email telling you when we are back. Okay, right. Yeah. On to the meat of today's session. We are going to talk about website migrations. I will unshare my screen so that we can get our faces in glorious full HD. He says doing a very inelegant job of trying to unshare that. Is there how do I button that? Remove from stage. There we go. Nice. There we go. Lovely faces. So let's start at the beginning. The phrase website migration comes up a lot. I'm sure we've used it on this webinar. I'm sure many people have heard it and used it. What does it mean? What types of things might that be? What's it involve? Where do we start?
Well, it can be anything, right? Changing. True. Changing a CMS, changing your domain name, redesign with new URL structures, new template, all kinds of stuff. Basically, for me, it's anything where the HTML changes and the location of the HTML changes, right? So if your URLs change, those kind of things, it's basically like moving house, as Taco said. Basically, you're moving house, or you're changing the layout in your house, which is essentially the same, because now the toilet is on the other side, right?
that could cause some real issues. Yeah,
exactly. And I think the main problem is that people do this multiple times and they don't really understand the mechanics behind it. So they don't tell the postman that you've moved houses, so your post won't arrive. Same thing with Googlebot. If you don't tell Googlebot that content has moved to another location, it might find it. But if there were backlinks, if it was already ranking, it won't, because it's not being transferred. And I think so. It's first understanding that any change to the URL structure, but also a migration is also if the HTML changes. If you go to a new platform, you need to keep the same H1s, and in order to prevent or to keep your ranking or minimize the risk of losing ranking. Let me put it that way. So yeah,
I think there's a lot of people overlook the fact that they'll say, "Oh, we're going to change the design." I think WordPress is really bad for this, because you can just go, "I'm going to change theme." And the thing that people, I think, don't often understand is that all of your equity, all of your value from an SEO perspective is kind of in the relationship between the URL, the content that's on that page, and the code that powers it. And if you break any one of those pieces, you change the URL, you change the code, or you change the content, you're losing that equity.
Or you change the votes, aka backlinks, right?
For sure. Yeah, because they're pointing to different places, or they're no longer. It doesn't. All that mapping doesn't work anymore. So I think so. We've got. I'm going to build a new website. I'm going to redesign my website. I'm going to change my WordPress theme. I'm going to restructure my content and all my URLs. All of these things are essentially kind of site migrations.
Yeah, or rebranding. I don't like the brand name. I'm going to rebrand.
Yeah, and then you change a bunch of your content alongside that, and you maybe delete your old blog posts. That's a migration of sorts as well.
Yeah. So there's like a migration is in a lot of things.
Makes sense. And I guess the back end as well, like technology stacks, things like hosting. Oh, am I still here? My laptop's just doing weird things.
No.
Cool. Things like hosting technologies, server locations, maybe slightly less important, but still worth considering.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's say I do what everyone does, and I go, I'm just going to change my theme. What happens? What goes wrong?
Well, usually or sometimes the HTML changes, sometimes the URL structure changes because, well, it does it in a slightly different way. And because you haven't done a good crawl or have a list of URLs that were previously there, they're not being redirected, as in there's no, I've been moved. So then you basically, most of your rankings will just drop. In some cases, if the previous version was really shit and the semantic HTML wasn't good or whatever, or every piece of content had the same page title, if you've fixed that, you might actually be ranking a lot better. But then you have to question yourself, why didn't I fix that beforehand, right?
Yeah, didn't need a site. Okay. And you don't know, like, you might be ranking better, but you might have lost equity elsewhere, and you could have been better.
Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned crawling the site and getting a list of URLs there. I think that's really good advice. Recommendations for what that process looks like?
Yeah, there's plenty of tools out there. So when I do a migration, I get my hands on as many URLs and data sources as you can have, right? So you go for Bing Webmaster Tools, Google Search Console, get all the index pages, use a site crawler. You can use Sitebulb or Screaming Frog or Ahrefs or SEMrush or whatever. Your analytics systems, your analytics systems get all the URLs in from there. If you have access to server logs, get all of that, and then deduplicate, and you'll end up with a massive list. You can use, if the brand has been going for ages and has gone through multiple migrations, check out the Wayback Machine. It's pretty cool. Just Google the Wayback Machine, put the URL in, and it will give you all the pages it has found, and in like up until I think 1995. So
wow,
long time ago. Basically, get your hands to as much URL resources. Oh, I'm forgetting one, which is backlink tools, right? So this is Ahrefs, SEMrush, Moz, link research tools, you name it. Any tool that will give you backlinks, and then create a massive list out of them and redirect everything. An often made mistake is that people don't redirect their images. For some brands, it is a massive thing because image search is actually, if you are in home decoration or if you build kitchens, right? Your catalog, people have been browsing your catalog in Google Images, in Pinterest. If you don't redirect those images to the new ones, you'll lose all of that.
And things like PDF files for catalogs as well, right? I see that overlooked a lot for sites that have that sort of thing.
Yeah. So there's a lot more to it. A lot more.
Definitely. What was I going to ask then? I got distracted. So yeah, get a big list of all the URLs, redirect them. You can do that via Yoast SEO. That's handy, isn't it?
Yeah.
So beyond just kind of doing like redirects, that's what I was going to say. I see a lot of businesses say, can't we just take the top 100 most trafficked pages from Google Analytics and redirect them? Do we really have to redirect all 5,000 or 50,000 of these URLs were found? And I guess the answer is
yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Every single one of them. You have to, otherwise you're killing equity.
Well, in some cases where content has spun out of control and the content is shitty and it's just like low quality, you might decide not to migrate that. But then at least not server 404, but server 410, so that it gets removed at some point. But in most cases, I would just say redirect as much as you can.
Nice. I just saw a question pop up in the chat about 410 saying, how should we do this? So yeah, you don't want to leave a bunch of 404 errors if you've removed stuff. You want to either say redirect it somewhere relevant, somewhere similar, or commit 410 it.
I think the whole thing with 404, the status code is I haven't encountered an error. So this means you need to come back. So Googlebot will do that at some point. Whereas if 410 is literally saying, I'm gone and I won't be back. Which, if that's the case, you should serve a 410.
Yep, that makes sense. Okay, and we've talked a lot about the URL redirection. Just before we get to Q&A, I wanted to get your thoughts on rewriting content. So I've got a blog with 100 blog posts that were written in 2014, and I'm doing a site migration. And I think I really ought to go through these and update them. What are the risks? What should I consider? Is it okay to change the author? How do I approach that safely?
So I think it's always good to update your content if it's more relevant. So if stuff is outdated and not relevant anymore, then it needs updating, right? Even I think the biggest risk lies in the fact that some things have earned backlinks. And if you're changing it to something completely irrelevant, or when it used to rank for a certain thing and then go, okay, you know what? I want to rank for something else, so I'm just going to sprinkle a bit of this on top. It doesn't work. Like, don't do that. But in general, if you can make it more helpful for the user, definitely update, right?
Just do it.
And if there is a new editor that does that, it's fine, right? That's my approach to it.
Yep, makes sense. That's human. It's helpful. It's sensible. It's not kind of weird and artificial, which usually means it's the right decision for SEO, right? If it seems odd and keywordy, it's probably not the best approach.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's one more thing, which is not so much about SEO, but I see this time and time again, where people are spending a lot of money on Google ads. They are spending a lot of money on Meta ads and all kinds of other things. And then all the landing pages change. They just don't update these landing pages. So suddenly the reporting is shit because it all goes redirects. And so if you are the SEO or if you're doing a migration, look at it broader. It's not purely an SEO migration. It's a migration of the whole.
Nice, good advice. And then you think about user experience, design, content conversion, all of it. Yep, nice. Yeah. Cool, okay. Should we summon Tucker back in and we can do some Q&A? Because I think we've got a bunch of questions and not a ton of time. That was super interesting. 1, 2, 3, Tucker. Look at that working. Lovely, very nice. Oh, we're missing the video.
He's still blacked out for me.
Yeah, I'm not sure why.
Hello. From beyond.
Magic button.
Maybe.
Yes.
Yes. There we go. Well done.
Well done.
Excellent. Can we see how big your monitor is? Does your webcam detach?
Yeah.
People don't believe me.
We can, but I'd have to hide all the other stuff I have in the same screen. So let's not do that right now.
Okay. We'll do a behind-the-scenes special, I guess.
Yes. Yeah, definitely can. I really love my curved Samsung screen. Yes. All right, so we do have quite a few questions. For those who joined a bit later, don't know how to ask a question, there's the Ask a Question or Q&A section that you can access on the right. There's the speech bubble with the question mark, ask your questions, upvote other questions, etc., etc. We will almost go through them by order of upvotes because I have an opinion, so it won't be exactly the order of upvotes. But we start with the most upvoted one. Because I think it's an interesting question by Rose. What can we do if our websites are profoundly affected by Google core updates, like dropping half the impressions and cannot recover from the adverse impacts?
Oh, I have two answers to this. I'm going to steam in. One is, so there's one of two things that have probably happened. One is Google's landscape has changed and the search results contain, I don't know, more local businesses and you're not local, or more products and you're selling guides and information, and there's a fundamental lack of fit. And the answer then is either change what you do and how you market it so that you align with what people searching Google want and what Google wants to show those people, or give up, which isn't ideal. So like Google is extremely good at understanding what people who search want and serving them the right things. And if you're not the right thing for that search, become the right thing. The other reason you might suffer from a core update is because you're doing it wrong. You are buying links. You're not adding value. You have a large, not very well-loved website. You have an ugly website. You have product reviews which aren't written by people who are subject matter experts, all of these types of things. And the answer to all of those scenarios is invest the time and effort in crafting web pages that demonstrate that your business or your brand provides the best solution and the best help for people who are searching in your problem space. And that's not the same as sell the cheapest problem or have the longest content page. It's be the most useful resource and then worry about how you monetize off the back of that. But if you're not a good fit or you don't have the best content, yeah, you're going to struggle, and you're going to struggle more as Google gets better and better at understanding what good looks like. And there is no easy way to turn that around other than fixing the underlying problem.
Yep, I agree with all of that. I think I'm going to add in the part where it goes about links. I see a lot of people still, it becomes so obvious if you look into their link profiles and you go, that is not really a link you've earned. That is obviously a paid link. That is obviously, I feel that a few of the last core updates, it was also a link refresh, especially in December 22. I saw in some very competitive niches, I saw a lot of websites drop overnight, which made a big jump. So it could also be links. For the rest, I fully agree with you. It's understanding where your content is actually helpful. A great way to look at this is looking at what terms you've dropped and then Google it yourself and then compare your results with the one that's now outranking. And if you can then I'm pretty sure you'll be saying, well, that is actually the better answer. That one deserves to rank. If not, it might be something else. But it's always good to just Google it and look at the SERP and what's ranking now, and then just be honest. It might need a lot of work to get back where you want to be, but Jono was already elaborating on that.
Cool. I think that is a very detailed answer from the both of you. There's a question by Neo. Does redirecting an old article to the homepage as a policy harm the site, or should all redirects be sent to similar content?
Similar content.
Then the follow-up question, of course, is what if there is none?
That's the tricky bit, right? Then you have to make a decision of which is the better user experience, a redirect to the homepage, which can be confusing. Like I clicked on the link to go to an article. Oh, what is this thing I'm on? That's a bit weird. And if you do that across 10,000 articles, that's going to look spammy. Or a 410, and you go, sorry, this page is no longer here. Here's some alternatives we might recommend, which also isn't a great experience.
I think on this I think the question goes a bit deeper and saying, if it has backlinks, if it has traffic, why are you removing it from your site, right? And I think the other part is if you do it to the homepage, what you'll see is that Google will basically report so-called soft 404s, where they're basically saying, well, the content is so radically different from what used to be there, so I'm just going to treat this as a 404. So in that case, if you have soft 404s, you really need to consider whether you want to have that content up there or send a 410. I hope that was helpful.
Short summary, as always, it depends. Love it. All right. So there's a question by Anne Donnelly, who's by now a friend of the show, I would say. How's everyone doing with the change to the new Google Analytics? And is there a good alternative that's good for SEOs? And what are the best metrics to track?
I think there are quite a few alternatives like Piwik and Phantom and some other ones as well. Basically, I think there is a great, if you're on Spotify, search for a GA4. There is like 2 episodes explaining what the difference between Google Analytics and GA4 is. All the ones are basically log file visualizers, whereas GA4 is very much been set up as a task driven. So you need to put the effort in, as Jono was saying, to say, this is what success for me looks like. And this is not a page view, but what does a person need to do when they're on that page? Do you want them to share it? Do you want them to click an upvote or whatever? Then that's how you should configure your GA4 for success. And that's what you should be reporting on. The others, yeah, it's basically the relative old interface of UA. It works for that, but I personally am a fan of measuring the right things and measuring what I want people to do on the website, because in the end, that pays the bills. Traffic doesn't pay the bills.
Yep. Nice.
All right. A completely different question, and now I love the reshuffle. Yes, by Adi. Is there a disadvantage when you update the author?
I think there is, if the author is a very well-known person, an expert in the field, well-known, cited loads of times, and if you then make it a newbie without an avatar and no speaker bio, I wouldn't do that. But if they're equal, I could potentially see that for some evergreen content, you say originally written by this author, now redirected by this author, something like that. That would make sense. But the only disadvantage I would say is if you migrate, for instance, and everything just becomes webmaster instead of the author.
Hate that. Really hate. Nothing says disingenuous, artificial, opaque brand that shouldn't rank more than a blog where all the articles are written by site admin. So, like, why would Google send anyone to those pieces of content?
Yeah.
I would go further. Also, I would say don't lie about who your authors are. Don't ghostwrite content. Don't change authors because they leave your business, etc. The connection between the person who wrote those words and the value and integrity and utility of those words is pretty deep. And if you're messing with that, Google's not going to trust it. They're not going to trust those authors. They're not going to trust you. Get people who know what they're talking about to write things that are useful, and then don't mess with that.
I am intrigued though by Arnout's answer, because he touched on rewriting content, like updating after a few years. Of course, with Yoast SEO, we're mostly focusing on WordPress. Is there a way in WordPress to properly represent that?
No, nor in any other CMS. Right? Like the concept of multiple authors through time is too abstract. Like this person wrote this post is really the only tool we have.
But on this, I think the best article that was written in my name was written by a ghostwriter, because I'm not a particularly good writer. I have a big writer's blog, but as long as it was literally my content, right? So it wasn't somebody else's. If somebody can word it better than me, I don't really see a problem in that. But what I see a lot is, well, this is basically what I want to say. You make it look nice, and then that screws everything up. So as long as you are on top of what's actually in the article, and whether it's really your vision and the expert's opinion, then you can do it. But I see a lot of the other ones, and then I wouldn't.
All right, that's clear. Looking at the clock, I think there is time for maybe 1 or 2 super quick questions. There's one by Chester that we can answer super quickly. Jono, you interim head of product, you can quickly answer this, can't you? Will
I
Yoast
can't
integrate
possibly
AI?
comment. Yeah, I can't comment on our roadmap for various reasons, but I can definitely reiterate what I said earlier: is that everybody is building AI features. So watch this space.
He basically said yes.
Uh,
Spoiler alert. Okay. Final one, because I like the question and I think the both of you can bust a myth here. It's by Karika, who says, I need to change my domain name that's more SEO friendly because it has a dash in it and I believe that's not good for SEO.
Go, Jono, take it away.
Short answer, it doesn't matter. Longer answer is it may be harder for users to type. It may be harder for people to remember if you put it on a billboard. It might be a pattern that's common amongst spammier sites because they'll want exact match phrases and they can't get the domains. So it's not inherently a problem, but if you think you can do better marketing with a different domain, it might be worth it. But then you're going to have to go through a domain migration and you're going to have to redirect all your stuff. You're probably going to miss some stuff and make some mistakes. You might lose 20% of your SEO. Maybe you do a perfect job, maybe you don't. It's a bit of a risk. Is it worth it? It depends.
Yeah, definitely. It depends. But in general, if your domain has been out there for longer and it's gained proper like backlinks and everything, don't change it. But if you are going to do it and you weren't happy with the URL structure, that is the time to do it. Because if you change your domain name, everything changes. So if you're going to do it, then do everything. Yeah, that's it. So, but I like with these kind of believe it's not good for SEO. I don't take that. I've not seen proof of that either. I always tell the story where why would content that ranks on 12345.html be less valuable than saying about Arnout Hellemans? It wouldn't make sense, right? If the content is the same, it's just a document location.
Yep.
All right. And I think with that, we've come to the end of today's webinar. As said, we will be doing a summer break. If you want the latest SEO news in your inbox during our summer break, click that button, that green button at the bottom. Sign up for the special SEO news for the summer break, and then we will see you in September. Thank you, Arnout, for joining us today. Thank you, Jono, for joining us today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, for all your amazing questions. Have a good summer, and see you in September.